It was one of those mornings when everything felt off. My alarm didn't go off, I woke up late, and the rain pounded on my window like a warning bell. I muttered under my breath as I hurried to get dressed, already feeling defeated before the day had truly begun. As I rushed out the door, forgetting my umbrella, the wind slapped cold droplets against my face. Great, I thought, this is exactly how bad days begin. But little did I know, one small act was about to flip my entire day upside down. The bus stop was crowded with others escaping the rain, but there was one old man standing at the edge, getting drenched. His coat looked too thin for this kind of weather. Most people avoided eye contact, pretending not to see his discomfort. Without thinking, I stepped closer and held my bag over him to shield him from the rain. He looked up, surprised, his wrinkled face breaking into a grateful smile. "Thank you, young one," he said softly, his voice shaky but warm. That small moment planted a seed I didn't yet recognize. The bus arrived, and as we got on, the driver smiled at me. Odd. Usually, he was gruff, barely acknowledging passengers. "You're doing good things today," he said quietly. His unexpected words gave me a strange sense of warmth, as though my simple act had already returned to me. I found a seat by the window, watching droplets race each other down the glass. That compliment from the driver echoed in my mind. Could something so small, holding a bag over someone's head, have started this odd positivity? When I got off at my usual stop, the rain had lightened. I decided to reward myself with a coffee. I needed something to reset the tone of my morning. As I entered the cafe, I noticed a long line, but oddly, it didn't bother me like it usually would. While waiting, a woman ahead of me dropped her wallet. Reflexively, I picked it up and handed it back. She looked shocked, as if not used to strangers being helpful. "Thank you so much," she said. "You saved my day already." Her gratitude felt contagious. When I finally reached the counter, the barista handed me my coffee with a grin. "It's on the house today," she said. I blinked, surprised. "But why?" I asked, still holding my card. She simply pointed to the woman I'd helped earlier, who was waving with a cheerful smile. That cup of coffee tasted better than any I had before. Not because of its flavor, but because it came wrapped in gratitude. For the first time that morning, I realized, kindness doesn't disappear, it circles back. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed. It was a call I'd been waiting on, a client I had pitched a difficult project to last week. Nervous, I picked up. "I just wanted to say," the client said, "your proposal really stood out. We're going with your team." I nearly choked on my coffee. After the rough start to my day, this felt like a major win. My heart raced with excitement. And yet, I couldn't help but think, had my morning of small kindness somehow aligned my luck? On my way to the office, I grabbed a taxi. The driver was unusually chatty. "You look like you're having a good day," he said. I laughed, sharing the little chain of events so far. He nodded thoughtfully. "Funny how one good thing leads to another," he said. "Happened to me once. Saved a cat from traffic, ended up meeting my wife that day." His story made me smile. "Kindness has strange ways of rewarding us," I replied. And for the first time, I felt fully present, appreciating every moment. At my office building, the elevator doors were closing when I saw a colleague rushing toward them. Without hesitation, I pressed the button to keep them open. She sighed in relief as she stepped in. "Thanks, I really needed that today," she said, her face looking tired. We rode up in silence, but that small gesture seemed to lift both our moods. By now, it was becoming clear. Every act of kindness was like tossing a pebble into a pond, the ripples kept spreading. As I settled at my desk, my manager walked by. Normally stern, today he paused. "By the way, your presentation last week was excellent. Really impressed." His words were simple, but carried so much weight for me. I beamed, feeling seen. In that moment, I thought back to the rainy morning. If I had ignored that old man, would any of these moments feel as bright? Probably not. Kindness wasn't just affecting others, it was changing me, too. During lunch, I shared my morning story with a few co-workers. One of them, Sarah, leaned forward, eyes wide. "You know, I read somewhere that kindness releases oxytocin, which makes you feel happier. Maybe you're just experiencing a chemical kindness high." We all laughed, but her words rang true. Maybe science was behind my good mood, but my heart knew better. Kindness felt right. Not because of chemistry, but because it connected me with the world around me in ways I hadn't felt in a long time. As I walked back from lunch, I passed a small flower vendor I usually ignored. Today felt different. The old woman behind the stand was gently arranging her blooms, though few people stopped. Something tugged at me. I bought a small bouquet, even though I didn't really need it. Her eyes lit up. "Bless you, child," she whispered. I smiled and realized I could give the flowers to someone who needed a lift. Even as I walked away, I felt the warmth of her gratitude following me like sunshine breaking through clouds. Back inside, I noticed James, the janitor, scrubbing scuff marks off the floor. Normally invisible to busy office workers, he looked exhausted. I handed him one of the flowers. "For you, James. Just because." His face shifted from surprise to a wide, genuine smile. "You made my whole week," he said softly. That simple sentence filled me with an unexpected pride. I wasn't solving world problems, but I was making tiny cracks in people's daily struggles, and that felt powerful. Later that afternoon, I overheard a coworker, Amanda, quietly crying at her desk. Normally, I would have felt awkward and kept my distance, but the rhythm of kindness guided me differently today. I approached gently and offered her another flower. "Rough day?" I asked. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "You have no idea. But this helps." I didn't pry, but I stayed nearby, letting her know she wasn't alone. Sometimes, kindness is just presence. As the day wound down, my manager called me in for a chat. My heart raced. Was something wrong? But instead, he handed me a bonus letter. "You've been an example of leadership and positivity," he said. "This is overdue." I stared at the envelope, speechless. The morning's raindrops felt like a lifetime ago. I wondered, was my attitude different? Was kindness subtly making me better at everything else? On the ride home, traffic was heavy, but I found myself letting cars merge ahead of me instead of grumbling. Drivers waved in gratitude. Each gesture, though minor, added to the strange joy that hummed through me like soft music. I realized that my day was now a tapestry woven with small acts, most lasting no more than seconds, but collectively forming something deeply meaningful. It wasn't luck, it was a mindset. As I neared my neighborhood, I saw a small dog dart across the street. It looked scared and lost. I pulled over and coaxed it with soft words until it cautiously approached, shivering as I scooped it up. The collar had a tag. I called the number, and within minutes, a grateful owner arrived in tears. "You don't know how much this means," she whispered, hugging her dog tightly. And once again, I saw how one small decision could create enormous relief for another. Just as I parked my car, a neighborhood boy ran over. "Hey, mister, you dropped this." He held up my house key, which must have slipped from my pocket while chasing the dog. His honesty was refreshing. I knelt to thank him, handing him a few coins for his honesty. "You've got a good heart," I said. His face beamed. And I realized, kindness seeds kindness, even in the smallest hearts. At home, my wife noticed my unusual glow. "You're different today," she remarked. Over dinner, I recounted my entire day, each small event flowing into the next like chapters in a book. As I finished, she squeezed my hand. "Maybe kindness isn't just something we give, maybe it's something we live." Her words struck me. It wasn't a chain reaction of coincidences, it was a shift in how I moved through the world. Lying in bed, I scrolled through my phone, reflecting on every moment. None of my actions required effort or sacrifice. Yet each one rewired my day, filled it with unexpected joy, and pulled others into its orbit. A single choice in the rain had shaped my entire reality. And I wondered, how many such days had I missed simply because I hadn't looked for the opportunity to be kind? As sleep crept over me, I made a quiet vow. Tomorrow, I would do it again. Not for rewards, but because kindness itself had become its own reward. A way to live fully, connected to others. With that thought, I drifted off, grateful, peaceful, and more alive than I had been in a long time. And outside, the rain had finally stopped. The next morning, my alarm buzzed right on time. The sky was clear, but the real test was waiting. Could I keep the kindness flowing, even without yesterday's perfect chain of events to guide me? As I stepped outside, I saw my neighbor struggling with a heavy trash bag. Without hesitation, I jogged over and helped him carry it to the curb. "You're a good neighbor," he said, surprised. Already, the ripple had begun. Driving to work, I noticed a woman on the shoulder, waving for help. Her front tire was completely flat. Normally, I might have passed by, telling myself I was late. But not today. I pulled over, offered my jack, and helped her change the tire. As we worked, she shared that she was on her way to an important job interview. "You've saved my career," she said gratefully. And again, I felt that unmistakable warmth. Stopping for coffee, I felt inspired to pay for the car behind me. The cashier grinned. That's the fifth one today. Apparently, I had joined a pay-it-forward chain. The fifth. I laughed. Seems kindness is contagious today. Driving away, I smiled, realizing that invisible threads of kindness were weaving through people's lives all over the city, strangers helping strangers without even knowing each other. At the office, a nervous intern named Daniel approached my desk. "Sir, may I ask you a question about the report?" His voice trembled with insecurity. I invited him to sit, walked him through the report, and offered encouragement. His shoulders relaxed. "Thank you," he said softly. I was so afraid to mess up. I saw a bit of my younger self in him, unsure but eager, and knew that this moment might shape his confidence for years. During a coffee break, I noticed the elevator technician struggling with heavy equipment. People rushed past him, but I held the door and steadied his load. "Thank you, sir," he said, wiping his brow. "Not many people even see us." That simple comment stayed with me. So many workers go unseen. Today, I made it a point to see them. Sometimes, the greatest kindness is simply recognizing another person's existence. Later that day, I received a tense email from a client, frustrated over a misunderstanding. My instinct was to respond defensively, but I paused. Instead, I replied with understanding, acknowledged their concerns, and offered solutions. Within minutes, they responded more calmly. "Thank you for hearing us out," they wrote. Kindness, even in words, had once again diffused conflict. Walking to lunch, I passed a street musician playing soulful tunes on a saxophone. His case held only a few coins. Feeling the pulse of my kindness journey, I dropped in a generous bill and smiled. He looked up, his eyes shining. "Bless you," he whispered between notes. His music seemed to grow richer, louder, filling the air with gratitude. My small gesture had fueled his passion, even for a moment. Turning a corner, I saw a woman sitting quietly on the sidewalk with a cardboard sign, "Anything helps." She wasn't asking loudly, just sitting with tired eyes. I bought her a sandwich and bottle of water, and handed it over. Her quiet, tearful thank you squeezed my heart. I realized how often we assume people's stories, but kindness allows us to touch lives without judgment. Returning from lunch, the grocery cashier looked overwhelmed as customers piled up. I offered a simple smile and light conversation as she rang up my items. "You're the first nice person I've had all day," she admitted. That sentence hit me. One person's small kindness can break through another's long streak of negativity. My day was fine-tuned to recognize those cracks now. Back at work, my manager pulled me aside. "I've been watching you," he said, not unkindly. "You've created a different energy in the team. People are more positive, even collaborative. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." It struck me deeply. Kindness doesn't just help individuals, it shifts entire environments. My small acts were becoming invisible leadership tools, shaping the culture around me without anyone calling it leadership. A few days later, James, the janitor I had given a flower to, approached me quietly. "You won't believe this," he said, barely containing his excitement. "I got promoted to maintenance supervisor. First time in 15 years. I congratulated him warmly. "You deserve it." James grinned. "You know, that little flower you gave me? I don't know why, but that day I felt seen, and I finally asked for the promotion. Small things give courage." That afternoon, our department held an unexpected meeting. To my complete shock, I was presented with an internal leadership award for fostering a positive work environment. As I stood there receiving applause, I couldn't help but think, this wasn't about ambition or strategy, it was about kindness. Genuine, simple, honest kindness had brought me here. Later that week, Daniel, the intern, had to present his first client report. His hands shook slightly as he approached the front of the room. Before he started, I gave him a reassuring nod from across the table. That tiny gesture seemed to ground him. He delivered confidently. When he finished, the clients were impressed. His silent glance of gratitude afterward said everything. Returning home that evening, I noticed my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Carter, struggling to carry her groceries. Without hesitation, I offered to help. As we unloaded her bags, she smiled. In my younger days, people helped one another without asking. You're keeping that alive. Her words reminded me how simple, timeless, and universally needed kindness is. At dinner, my daughter asked, "Daddy, why are you always helping people now?" I paused, realizing how much she'd noticed. "Because every time we help someone," I explained, We make the world a tiny bit better, and that kindness often comes back when we least expect it. She nodded seriously, soaking it in far deeper than I expected. The next morning, my regular bus driver greeted me with unusual excitement. "You know that old man you helped weeks ago? He's my father." I froze, stunned. "He told me about the stranger who shielded him from the rain," the driver said. "That moment lifted his spirits during a tough week. Thank you." My simple act had touched lives I never even knew about. Inspired, I volunteered at a local charity event that weekend, something I might have skipped before. Dozens of volunteers worked side by side, feeding families and distributing clothes. Looking around, I saw that kindness wasn't rare, it just needed people willing to step forward. The collective energy was powerful. I felt part of something larger than myself. Later that night, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. "I heard what you've been doing," he said, voice cracking. "You inspired me to patch things up with my brother after years of silence." Tears welled up in my eyes. Kindness had reached far beyond my daily routine. It was stitching together broken relationships I never imagined could heal. At work the next week, my manager invited me into his office again. "We want to offer you a significant raise and expanded role," he said. "You've not only improved results, you've changed people." I accepted, but not because of ambition. This promotion was different. It was a byproduct of something purer. The reward wasn't money or title, it was watching lives brighten around me. Driving home that evening, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I saw someone more grounded, more at peace than ever before. Not because I had mastered life, but because I had opened myself to others. Kindness hadn't just changed my day anymore. It had rewritten my weeks, my relationships, my career, my entire lens through which I viewed life. And there was still more to come. The following week, my daughter's school invited parents to speak at Career Day. Initially, I planned to talk about my profession. But as I prepared, I realized my true message wasn't about work, it was about kindness. Standing before eager young faces, I shared my story. One simple act of shielding a stranger from rain changed everything. The teachers nodded thoughtfully, and I saw some of the children's eyes light up with quiet understanding. Afterward, one teacher approached me. "Your message was exactly what we've been trying to teach," she said softly. "But hearing it as a real story will stay with them much longer." Her words humbled me. Sometimes, we forget how much power personal experience holds. My journey had become more than just my own, it was now a teaching tool for others. Back at work, I handled a furious customer on a complex account issue. Normally, his harsh words would have triggered my defensiveness. But I paused, listened calmly, and acknowledged his frustration. Within minutes, his anger softened. "Thank you for not reacting like everyone else does," he admitted. My kindness wasn't weakness, it was my strongest skill, disarming conflict with empathy. That afternoon, I noticed Amanda, the co-worker I once comforted, sitting alone with tears in her eyes again. Her father had passed away unexpectedly. Instead of empty condolences, I sat silently beside her, offering quiet presence. After a while, she whispered, "Thank you for not making me feel like I had to pretend to be okay." Kindness, I was learning, sometimes spoke loudest in silence. The company announced a new partnership with a local charity. My manager nominated me to coordinate employee volunteering efforts. "You've become the heart of this place," he said. Organizing the charity event allowed me to see co-workers in a new light, people who, when given the opportunity, overflowed with generosity they rarely had a platform to express. One evening, I received a message from a college classmate I hadn't heard from in years. "I've been following your kindness journey online. It gave me the courage to reach out and apologize for how I treated you back then." Forgiveness washed over me easily. "We've both grown," I replied. "Let's reconnect." Kindness had unlocked doors even in my past, offering healing I hadn't thought possible. As the weeks passed, my entire team's energy shifted. People helped one another without being asked. Small gestures, like covering for sick co-workers or writing thank you notes, became common. It dawned on me that leadership wasn't always about directing, sometimes it was simply modeling. By living kindness, I had created space for others to follow. At a regional conference, our company was recognized for exceptional corporate culture and community service. As I stood with my colleagues accepting the award, I felt deep gratitude. What started as shielding an old man from the rain had bloomed into something far bigger, an organizational movement rooted in compassion, empathy, and human connection. During a business trip, I found myself seated beside an elderly woman at the airport who looked lost and confused. Gently, I offered assistance navigating her gate. As we walked, she smiled. "It's rare to find kind people these days," she said. "You remind me of how the world used to be." Her words reaffirmed my commitment. Kindness wasn't outdated, it was desperately needed. That night in my hotel room, I journaled everything that had unfolded since that rainy morning. What struck me most wasn't the promotions, awards, or compliments, it was how alive I felt every single day. Kindness had rewired my brain, sharpened my awareness, and filled my life with color. And as I closed my journal, I smiled, knowing I'd barely scratched the surface of what was possible. During my ride back from the airport, the taxi driver struck up a conversation. "You look peaceful, my friend," he said. I smiled and shared a bit of my journey. He nodded thoughtfully. "You know, my grandfather used to say, kindness is like planting trees under whose shade you may never sit." His words struck deeply. I had seen many of those trees growing already. The next weekend, I attended another community event. A teenage volunteer named Malik approached me. "Sir, I heard you speak at Career Day. That's why I'm here today." I was stunned. My simple story had inspired someone to act. Malik's presence reminded me that every word, every deed could ripple far beyond my immediate reach, touching lives I might never fully know. At work, I faced a tough situation. A struggling employee was failing to meet expectations. The easy route was termination. But instead, I sat with him, listened, and offered mentorship. Weeks later, his performance dramatically improved. "No one's ever given me a second chance like you did," he said. Kindness wasn't just about helping strangers. Sometimes, it meant having the patience to help those closest grow. One morning, I found a handwritten letter in my mailbox. It was from the elderly man I had sheltered from the rain that very first day. "You didn't just shield me from the rain," he wrote. "You reminded me that humanity still exists." I held the letter quietly for a long time. His words reaffirmed something I'd come to understand. Even the briefest act of kindness can live on long after the moment passes. That evening, my daughter asked me, "Will I be kind like you when I grow up?" I smiled and pulled her close. "You already are, sweetheart," I said. Kindness isn't something you wait to become, it's something you practice, one small choice at a time. Watching her innocent eyes take in the words filled me with hope for the world she would shape. One afternoon, I witnessed two customers arguing aggressively at the checkout line. The tension was thick. The cashier looked overwhelmed. Stepping forward, I spoke calmly to both. "Let's all breathe. Life's too short for this." My words seemed to break the tension. Both customers apologized, and the cashier quietly mouthed, "Thank you." Small interventions could diffuse storms before they grew. Later that month, I anonymously donated to a struggling coworker whose spouse was battling illness. They never knew where the support came from, but I overheard them say, "Someone's looking out for us." That invisible generosity brought a different kind of satisfaction, not recognition, but the quiet knowledge that I was participating in the invisible network of goodness that holds us all up. One day, my entire team gathered unexpectedly. "We've been watching you for months," Sarah, one of my colleagues, said with a grin. "And we wanted to say thank you." They handed me a scrapbook filled with handwritten notes, photos, and small stories of how my kindness had impacted their lives. As I flipped through, my throat tightened. This was a harvest I never intended to sow but was blessed to receive. During a public leadership panel, someone asked me, "What's your biggest leadership secret?" I paused, knowing they expected something strategic or innovative. "My secret is simple," I answered. "Be kind. Not because of what you get, but because of who you become." The audience went silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. The truth, after all, was powerful in its simplicity. Lying in bed that night, I reflected deeply. My life hadn't changed because I'd gotten wealthier, promoted, or recognized, though those had happened. My life had changed because I had changed. Kindness had rewired my habits, reshaped my reactions, and softened my view of the world. And all of it traced back to one tiny moment in the rain, proof that even the smallest spark can light an entire forest. One morning at a coffee shop, a young man cautiously approached me. "I recognize you from the charity event," he said. "I wanted to thank you. You inspired me to quit my toxic job and volunteer full-time." I was stunned. His courage wasn't small. "It wasn't me," I replied. "You had that kindness in you all along. You just chose to act on it." His smile said everything. Kindness doesn't create heroes, it awakens them. Cleaning out my father's attic one weekend, I discovered an old photo of him helping a stranger push a broken-down car on the highway. I never knew that side of him. Looking at the photo, I realized, maybe this journey hadn't started in the rain that day, maybe I was simply carrying forward a torch passed quietly from one generation to another. A co-worker's child was in the hospital. I visited them, bringing snacks, books, and quiet company. The child's laughter during story time was like sunlight in that sterile room. The parent whispered through tears, "You gave us a break from fear." In that moment, I saw how kindness wasn't about fixing everything. Sometimes, it was simply borrowing someone's burden, even for a few minutes. One afternoon, the office elevator broke down. A delivery worker struggled up the stairs with heavy boxes. Without hesitation, I helped him carry the load. As we reached the top, he smiled gratefully. "You didn't have to do that." I replied, "That's exactly why I did." It was becoming second nature. Kindness no longer needed planning. It was simply how I moved through the world. One evening, I randomly texted an old high school friend, "Thinking of you. Hope you're doing well." Her reply surprised me, "I really needed this today. Been struggling. Thank you." Sometimes, kindness is a 5-second text that lands exactly when someone's soul is slipping. We never know who's quietly drowning. At the annual charity gala, I was recognized for my consistent volunteer efforts. Standing on stage, I shared briefly, "We often wait for the world to get better before we get kinder. But maybe the world gets better because we get kinder first." The room was silent. I saw nods, even tears. My words weren't brilliant, they were true. And truth has a strange way of piercing hearts gently. That night, brushing my teeth, I paused and looked into my own eyes in the mirror. I saw someone more patient, more empathetic, and more peaceful than years ago. This wasn't the result of a grand plan. It was the quiet reward of choosing, over and over, to extend grace when it was easier not to. Visiting my grandparents' graves, I whispered, "Thank you for planting seeds you never saw grow." I felt their presence, as if they approved of the legacy continuing forward. We rarely inherit money or titles that matter. But values, especially kindness, ripple for generations, often silently, but always powerfully. One day, I found a small anonymous package on my desk, a handwritten note and a book titled The Power of One Small Act. The note read, "Your ripple reached me. This is my way of keeping it going." Tears welled up. The circle had now come full, kindness returning home in unexpected ways. Walking home that evening, autumn leaves crunching beneath my feet, I felt a deep sense of alignment. Life wasn't perfect, challenges still existed, but I had discovered an unshakable anchor. Kindness didn't remove storms, but it made me sturdier in them. The world hadn't changed, but I had, and that had made all the difference. Weeks later, my daughter's school invited me back. This time, I wasn't prepared for what I walked into, a surprise assembly honoring kindness in action. The students had created projects inspired by my first visit: kindness trees, community drives, and letters to nursing homes. My eyes stung with emotion. Seeds I'd planted had grown into forests I never imagined. After the assembly, one teacher said, "You've sparked something we hope will last for generations." We even started a permanent kindness club. Standing there, I realized, the ripple wasn't just ongoing, it was multiplying, spreading through kids who might grow up seeing kindness not as a choice, but as normal life. At work, our company officially implemented a wellness and compassion policy, focusing on mental health, flexible schedules, and volunteer days, partially modeled after my quiet advocacy over the past year. When leadership truly embraces kindness, it isn't fluff, it becomes strategy. And that strategy attracts good people, who in turn build great things. At the local gym, a man nervously approached me. "You may not remember me, I bullied you in school," he confessed. "I do remember," I admitted gently. "But life's too short to carry that pain. I forgive you." His shoulders relaxed. "Your story changed me," he said, eyes glistening. Kindness, I saw again, has no expiration date. A local journalist interviewed me about my journey. "What advice would you give someone who wants to start spreading kindness?" she asked. "Don't wait for a grand gesture," I replied. Kindness starts in 5-second windows: a smile, a door held open, a listening ear. Small seeds grow tall trees. Her pen paused as she nodded thoughtfully. That evening, I received a message from a young father. "After hearing your story, I've started modeling kindness for my kids. They now leave little thank you notes for people everywhere. Thank you for inspiring my family." I smiled. His kids were now planting seeds of their own. Kindness was turning into a family tradition across households I'd never meet. At a charity auction, an elderly widow I once assisted recognized me. She grabbed my hands tightly. "After you helped me that day, I began volunteering. My loneliness faded." Her eyes twinkled. "You didn't just help me, you showed me how to help others." That's when I fully grasped, true kindness isn't addition. It's multiplication. The mayor's office honored me with a Community Light Award. Standing at the podium, I simply said, "This award belongs to every person who chose to pass kindness forward." I only lit one match. The room filled with applause. But in my heart, I knew, the real reward wasn't the plaque, but the unseen ripples spreading outward. Later, I was asked to mentor younger professionals on leadership. I didn't teach them financial models or growth charts. Instead, I taught them about the quiet power of empathy, patience, and listening, how true leadership is earned not by commanding, but by lifting others up, one human moment at a time. That evening, I hosted a dinner with many of the people whose lives had intertwined with mine throughout this journey. The janitor, the intern, the bus driver, the teachers, the volunteers. We laughed, shared memories, and reflected. Each person had, in turn, inspired others. As I looked around, it hit me, all of this began with one tiny act, on one rainy morning. While waiting for a flight, I noticed a young woman comforting a crying child. She spoke softly, calming the little one with patience and grace. When she glanced my way, I recognized her, one of the students from my daughter's first Kindness Club meeting. She mouthed, "You taught me." My heart swelled. Kindness had traveled far, touching lives I no longer directly influenced. Later that evening, I received an email from another continent. A charity worker wrote, "Your story was shared in our leadership training. We've since built a local kindness campaign, reaching hundreds." Tears filled my eyes. The small match I lit years ago was sparking fires in places I'd never set foot. Kindness truly knows no borders. During a hike in the mountains, I paused by a river. Watching the gentle current flow, I reflected, like this river, kindness carves paths slowly but powerfully, shaping lives over time. Its strength isn't loud, but steady, patient, and unrelenting. That's why kindness changes the world, not by force, but by persistence. A publisher reached out, asking me to write a book on my journey. "The world needs more stories like yours," the editor said. At first, I hesitated, I never sought attention. But then I realized, this wasn't about me. It was about permitting others to believe that small acts matter. An old mentor of mine visited and said, "I've watched you grow into someone I deeply admire." His eyes sparkled with pride. "You've lived what most only talk about." I replied humbly, "I've simply been trying to pay forward what you once taught me." Kindness often circles back, leaving both giver and receiver deeply blessed. One night, a young employee called me in tears. He was overwhelmed, questioning his purpose. Instead of offering cliches, I simply listened. When he finished, I said, "The fact that you care this deeply is proof you're exactly where you need to be." His voice steadied. Sometimes, the kindest thing we can offer is a safe space. A close friend passed away unexpectedly. At his funeral, people shared stories of how his quiet kindness touched them. Listening, I realized, none of us are remembered for our resumes, but for how we made others feel. And when our time comes, kindness is the most valuable legacy we leave behind. One evening, I fell ill and was hospitalized briefly. Nurses, friends, co-workers, and even strangers surrounded me with care. Lying there, I whispered to my wife, "All the kindness we give does come back, doesn't it?" She squeezed my hand gently and smiled, "Always." At her school graduation, my daughter gave a speech. "My father taught me that one small act of kindness can change a life. And now, I want to spend my life doing the same." The audience stood to applaud, but my tears blurred them all. My greatest legacy wasn't in my career, it was in my child's heart. That evening, sitting on my porch beneath a starry sky, I whispered aloud, "Thank you." Not for wealth or fame, but for the beautiful, unexpected journey that one rainy morning had sparked. Kindness had given my life depth, purpose, and quiet joy I never could have planned. One morning, years later, I found myself caught in the rain again, just like that day so long ago. But this time, I had an umbrella. I noticed a young man nearby getting drenched. Without hesitation, I walked over and held my umbrella over him. As he looked up, surprised, I smiled. Sometimes a small gesture can change everything. As we walked together under the umbrella, the young man asked, Why did you help me? Most people would just walk by. I chuckled softly, because someone once did something simple for me, and my entire life changed. His curious eyes told me my words planted a new seed, just as one had been planted in me. Months later, my company hosted my retirement party. Former co-workers, family, friends, and community members all gathered to celebrate not my career milestones, but my legacy of kindness. Speech after speech shared how small, simple acts had touched countless lives. I sat humbly, realizing that kindness doesn't retire, it echoes. One quiet morning, I wrote a letter to my newborn grandchild. The world may feel heavy at times. But remember, one kind word, one gentle act, can tip the scale toward hope. Never underestimate the power of simple goodness. Sealing the letter, I smiled, knowing it would one day guide another generation. At the local park, the community planted a tree in my honor, in tribute to a life of kindness. Watching it sway gently in the breeze, I reflected how fitting it was. Trees grow slowly, offering shade, stability, and beauty, much like kindness itself. At a charity event, a young woman shared her testimony. I was once homeless. A stranger's kindness gave me a meal and hope. That hope led me here today, to help others. Her story mirrored my own journey. Kindness multiplies, often quietly, invisibly, but always powerfully. Years later, the elderly man I first helped on that rainy morning reached out through my daughter, who tracked him down. Now frail but smiling, he said, "I never imagined that brief moment would lead to all this. Thank you for reminding me of humanity that day." We embraced, two lives forever connected by one small act. The city established an annual Kindness Day inspired by my journey. Schools, businesses, and neighbors performed random acts of compassion. Seeing children handing out flowers, volunteers delivering meals, and strangers helping strangers, I whispered, this is the world we were always meant to build." In my final years, I often sat peacefully, watching the world move around me. I saw so many acts of kindness, many by people who had no idea where the movement had begun. I smiled. My greatest work had never been my job title. It was the silent revolution of compassion passed from one person to the next. Moral of the story: never underestimate the power of one small act of kindness. You may think you're helping one person for one moment, but you could be planting the roots of a forest that grows for generations.